Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this special episode of Let's Get Vaccinated on HoodMed Chats. Tonight, we will be diving into the SCOTUS decision on abortion.
For this special episode
And,
of Let's Get Vaccinated.
sorry about that. And we will. So, thank you guys for joining us for this important conversation. My name is Nisi Hudson, Chair and Science Director of Hood Medicine Initiative, which is a nonprofit collective of scientists, physicians, hackers, and assorted geeks focused on health equity and reducing the spread of mis and disinformation. This podcast is just a chance for us to connect health experts and community activists to bring real talk and mad science to our audience. And tonight we have two special guests with us. We have Dr. Ijoma Opara, who received her medical degree from Wayne State University School of Medicine, and she's currently a double-boarded certified assistant professor of internal medicine and pediatrics there, as well as associate program director of internal medicine and pediatrics residency and attending physician. She's the founding director of the internal medicine curriculum, Health Equity and Justice in Medicine, and the co-founding director of Wayne State University's Global Health Alliance. And you can find her every weekend on Twitter Spaces, leading the Antiracism in Medicine Action Roundtable. Just search for hashtag AimArt to join the discussion. Welcome, Dr. Opara. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy and sad to be here at the same time.
I know. And last but not least, we have Jamel Hudson, my partner in crime, who's also the legal advisor for Hood Medicine. And he's going to help us break down today's ruling and what it means in the context of the history of the United States of America. So if you hadn't heard, if you're living under a rock, and today the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, and in doing so, essentially allowed states to make their own decisions about abortion and removed protections of abortion rights that we've had for the past 50 years. So I thought we might start by just getting some initial thoughts from the both of you. I'll start with you, Dr. Opara. Where are you at? Where's your head at right now?
So to be honest with you, I'm still in this place of surrealness. It's like, is this happening?
It is.
I'm feeling the way this is weird. This is a very weird place to compare my feelings, but I don't know how you felt when you woke up and realized that Trump was elected president.
Mhm.
And that happened.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm 100. I'm only 40, and I feel like I've lived through too many things.
Yeah.
And there's just this feeling of surrealness. Like, to be honest with you, I'm still locating my feeling. I have like cried, and I have laughed, and I have growled, and I've roared, and I've done all those things. And usually my trauma response is freeze, and I've frozen a little bit too. So that's where I'm at. We anticipated this. We had the leak, and our aunties and mothers and grandmothers and sisters who have been doing reproductive justice work for the past forever have warned us. So
Yeah.
it's not as if like I'm not shocked. I'm even surprised at myself that I'm not terribly surprised that it came this fast. Actually, I'm not, a lot of people who also sort of anticipated this. A lot of them have told me that they didn't realize it would be this fast, though. I actually am not surprised, because when white supremacy and white patriarchal supremacy is at work, it do work really fast, and this has been a long time coming, because ultimately this is the country. People have this myth of progress, that we just sort of keep, like, progress is linear and we're just always going in that linear direction, but understanding that we're ever pushing a boulder up an incline, whereby the boulder is always trying to roll down, and there is this constant move to want to reset to 1619, to 1776. It's like always trying to reset to where, you know, it's white, straight, presenting, whatever they do behind the closed doors is different, but presenting straight, like straight, cisgendered, so-called Christian men in charge of everything and in control of everything. And that is what, when America is great again. So we know that that is always the move. That's always the vibe. So progress is not linear. That's mythological. So we know that, but still to be in this moment and realize that this is really happening, sort of what is happening in my body in response and a reaction, is this sense of almost like denial, like, no, this cannot be happening. You know, it is truly a trauma response seeking to sort of protect me from the shock of that. This it is
Oh, but
happening.
it is happening, I promise you. And
It
and
is happening.
it
It
feels
is
like,
happening.
a very slippery slope, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you think from sort of your perspective as an attorney?
Well, I have to be honest. Uh, I was born in 1972.
Mm-hmm.
Roe came down in the 60s. So I don't know any other universe other than the universe that we have lived in for the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just to kind of give everyone a history lesson, Roe v. Wade essentially codified abortion rights at the federal level. They basically termed it as a 14th Amendment due process right, the right of a woman to have the privacy, to have a baby or not have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so with this decision, it changes a lot. I haven't really wrapped my head around it
Right.
as to the ripple effects, but they're going to be long and wide. The health impacts, the wealth and disparity impacts that are going to be showing itself over however many years until a suitable solution comes up. It's really unfortunate, but I mean, we've known this is
Yeah,
coming.
we knew.
They've been working at this for decades,
For decades. That's
Yeah.
right.
chopping away, chopping away, chopping away.
That's right.
And you give people enough time and opportunity, they will find the rationale and the willpower to make things happen.
So, like, you told us a little bit about it, but like, as far as like Roe versus Wade itself, why did it come back under consideration at this point? I know that the Trump era kind of precipitated that with his appointees, but what were they conniving to do?
It's all about the viability standard that the original court case was adjudicated on. Back in Roe v. Wade and Casey versus Planned Parenthood, essentially that viability was determined to be about 24 weeks. Recently, there have been a spate of state level laws that have come around and said, "Oh no, the viability point is now 15 weeks or 6 weeks,
Yeah.
6 weeks."
Insane.
Yeah, before a woman would even actually know that she's pregnant in most instances. So they've taken this standard and basically buttressed by the Republican viewpoint, have taken it all the way to the Supreme Court where they knew they had the votes.
Yeah.
There was a dominant amount of conservative justices. They knew this was going to happen. And basically that gave them the ability to make this happen. This has been in the works for years, to the point where a lot of people are not surprised, but also because it happened, the moment it happened, all kinds of laws went into effect. So that is going to have an impact on wherever you live and the laws that are going to impact you and your healthcare choices.
Great.
I'm going to sidestep a little bit and sort of go off on a tangent really quickly because there's a Pew Research Center poll that was a national poll, and it indicated that 6 in 10 Americans believe that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. And I just feel like it's another reflection of the issue that we always have, is that the people that are these elected officials don't really represent the views and where the American people really are on so many issues. Don't you think, Dr. Pa?
Oh my God, you are hitting the nail on the head. It might be the same Pew Research, but I think what I was reading in percentages, so 61% of Americans supports abortion rights and reproductive rights. And like you said, so many issues. 90% of Americans support common sense gun laws, for example, and the list goes on. So there's something very weird about our so-called democracy. I can't even call it that. So when
Yeah,
you talk about, like, what is this? What exactly is this? It is an oligarchy,
yeah,
because it is a few people, and that's why I said what I said earlier. It is a few people who have carried this charge that America must look a certain way and be a certain way for a certain purpose and function in the world. And that has sort of been the intergenerational charge forever, and that is the white patriarchal supremacist charge that, and that tells them they have to control everything in order to hoard political and economic power. Look, and Gamel, sorry, am I pronouncing it correct, Mr.
it's
Hudson? Is it
Jermel. It's not
Jermel?
phonetically spelled.
Okay, Jermel. Forgive me, but now I know. Now I know, Jermel.
It's okay.
Jermel, I would love your input here, but my understanding is that up until the Civil War, from a historical lens, abortion and contraception were legal. That was my understanding, and that we started to see this modern fight against abortion rights after a couple of things started happening. One, the removal of prayer from schools, and two, integration.
Mm,
Yes.
So
yeah,
after Civil Rights Act was passed, after integration of schools was legalized, we started to see this pushback really as an overall effort, again, to return America back to what it was, to the original, right, vision of what it's supposed to be, which is white and heteronormative. So that's why it don't make sense where on these really huge major issues where the people are like, no, we're cool, right? There is
yeah,
still this need to implement a certain way of life and a belief system that is rooted in, a 17th century, 18th century logic, right? In 2022, despite what the populace says. So that I don't think it's a tangent at all, Nisi. I don't. I think that it is 100% part and parcel of the conversation, and why we have to name it as such. And that's what. And I'll say this quickly. I know we'll unpack it further when we talk about the reproductive justice lens. And we have our, again, Black women needing to frame the conversation in the ways that it needs to be framed. So organizations like Sister Song, Black Mamas Matter Alliance, In Our Own Voice, and the whole list, the Afaya Center, Ubuntu, Black Family Wellness Center, all these folks who have done reproductive justice work from the beginning, who have understood this fight for what it is, to frame the ways that we need to be having these conversations and intervening in the ways that needs to happen so that we can be where we need to be at. They understood the context that this fight really lies. It's not about women's lives and babies. Like, they don't give a damn. Because if they do, why are they the same people that vote against social safety net programs, about affordable housing, what would give folks affordable food, access to healthy, nutritious, affordable food, and food security, and affordable education, higher education, and the list goes on and on. They steady vote against these programming. So why do you say you care about the life, the world that these babies will be born in, and you're not providing the conditions and the resources that will support their lives for them to thrive? But meanwhile, you say you support, like, it's not about that. It's
that's not about
always about
that.
the
I mean, let's
control.
be clear. These aren't pro-life proponents. That's
No.
the banner under which they purvey this oppressive, tactics. But these are Death Eaters we're talking about.
Mm,
If you wanted to like throw it back to before the civil rights era, all those times, like
mm,
life has never been important in this country. They stamped out all of the native, damn near all of the native population coming over here, and then ground us into the dirt for 400 years. This isn't about preserving life, and it never has been. I mean, I think it's couldn't be any clearer with how much progress they've made in, you know, preserving all of their gun rights in the face of mass murder after mass murder after mass murder, and then turning around and taking away reproductive rights. And, you know, they have no provisions for us. I think we constantly sit back and wonder why they vote against their own self-interest. And I think it's just because since time immemorial, it's almost sickening. It's almost like a lust, or like, I don't know, it's like they get something out of voting for things that they know hurt minorities. And we've seen it time and time again, because none of the things that they voted for help them. Like, that's the thing about evil. It's completely indiscriminate, and they think they can wield it, and it'll just, you know, hurt us and hurt the Mexicans and hurt the Blacks and everybody else. But, you know, evil, everything the light touches is its kingdom. You can't hold it back once you unleash it. And so it's like all of these laws that are meant to oppress us are actually oppressing them too. And that's why people, you know, in these red states that are in lower socioeconomic brackets, they're not doing any better than we are. But I don't think they care. So
well, they don't think so. They don't think they're doing worse than they're doing, because
I mean, they know they still have white privilege, but how much is that worth in the open market when gas is $6 a gallon? You can't put white privilege in the gas tank. I mean, it don't make sense to me, but it's almost a psychosis. It's like this mass delusion that, like, you know what? You're right. Let's do this. And they go with the propaganda, they go with the laws, and they vote their conscience. But it's ultimately hurting them. It's hurting their communities just as much as it's hurting ours. And I think we will certainly start to see more and more those chickens coming home to roost, for sure. You know, I think one of the things that was clear from the clear consequence of what's going to happen after today is that, you know, the states will have purview over what their laws are going to be. And we've already seen some really extreme proposals for abortion bans, mostly across the South. Once again, red states doing it big. You know, we've got Texas, the Dakotas, Idaho, Mississippi, Arkansas, all the lynching places, all the places they love a good lynching.
All the lynching places.
Yeah, just today in America, in Indiana, here, they threw their hat in the ring too. And most of these, the punishment for breaking this abortion ban would be multiple years in prison, up to 15 years in most places, with no exceptions for rape or incest. And in some states, not even allowable in medical emergencies. You know, there's so many lives that don't matter to the All Lives Matter people. But here's a legal question for you. Why not have stricter deterrence for rape or incest? Why are we punishing the people who might have to carry, you know, fetuses from incidents of rape or incest, which is already like double traumatizing someone, instead of having stricter laws against rape and incest? Rapists, we've seen time and time again, from celebrities to the everyday rapist. They rarely meet justice, and they do, it's barely a slap on the wrist.
The only thing I can say is just to refer back to the doctor's earlier comments about the patriarchal slash methodology that has been employed on us to keep us in our place, but also to preserve their so-called way of life. It's been codified into laws, and that they now have a responsibility to have a say in a woman's reproductive rights, and that those rights that were a part of the 14th Amendment, every person has due process rights, the rights to liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all that. But apparently a woman's body, the sanctity of a woman's body is not
It's not part of that.
not part of that due process,
Due
that has
process.
been promised to every American. So from a legal side, I really wonder, well, where does this pertain? What does this mean going forward? In the Supreme Court decision, they even left breadcrumbs to let you know what was on the horizon. He name dropped cases that they intend on going for next. Same
Griswold,
sex, yeah,
contraception,
Yeah.
Lawrence for same-sex relationships, and then also the decision on Obergefell for same-sex marriage.
yes. And if this isn't taking us back to Mayberry, I don't know what is. Essentially, what this does is it undoes the 14th Amendment. Any person's right to have purview of their own body, their decisions, who I'm going to love. Unfortunately, like I said, I was born in 1972. These are all things that I just, we think that these are inalienable rights. But the Constitution apparently doesn't say that.
So if this is the consequence of today's ruling, what's stopping them from undoing the 13th Amendment and sending us right back to the cotton fields? Exactly. It's like there's no sanctity at all. We used to argue bitterly about the Supreme Court because when Trump first came into office, I was just like, that's it, it's a wrap. It's like we're headed down a path we'll never be able to turn back from. He's just like, no, the Supreme Court holds the line. They're the last bastion of integrity. And I was just like, boy.
But I mean, I'm an attorney. That has been what I've been preached year after year.
I understand.
Forever. But
I understand.
It is a concept.
Yeah.
A concept that has been put in place as a construct, as a part of government. But
that's right.
Government is only as strong as the individuals that we have in place representing us and our rights. When you have a disparity of ideals, agenda that creeps into how we make decisions, then sometimes so-called justice gets perverted a little bit. And I'll admit when I'm wrong. I'll admit
y'all hear that was on tape, y'all.
Yeah, I mean,
that's called a healthy marriage right there.
I know
that is a healthy marriage.
But unfortunately, I know that I'm not the only one. I am not the only person who's had their faith shaken by the events that have taken place.
Yes.
I'm not the only person who is going to be rethinking how we view things that come forward. And I think that's what it's going to take, not only on an individual level, but how we approach group efforts moving forward and being active and trying to make a difference, using the resources for the greater good, because
absolutely
they've already perverted what the greater good is for.
And you see, if I may, I forget the exact quote of it, but essentially, a number of people have said this. Democracy requires hyper vigilance, and Jamel, you said this multiple times in different ways, which is you were born in 1972. Took it for granted. There's so many rights, our voting rights, pardon me, again, the right to
to marry who I want to marry,
right, or whatever, whatever it is, we just take it for granted. And part of it again, is the conditioning. And by the way, I want to say I'm sorry, because you are likely grieving, you and so many people, right, especially who are in the space of the law, are grieving right now. And many people agree for different reasons, but I just wonder how you feel, because of course you've had to believe in what you believe. That's what you were taught, that's what you conditioned, that's what you've built your practice and your way of life around, the sanctity of the Constitution and all these other, tenets of what it means to be,
I
to
tried to
be,
tell him. I'm chicken
a
little
person
over
in,
here. I told him the sky was falling. Listen.
but
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 I mean,
but
but
I get it. Like, what is the alternative? That is what, for us, many folks, when we talk about the work we do in anti-racism in medicine, and you're telling these doctors, honey, you are performing medical malpractice if you are knowingly using race practices like race correction and all that sort of race-based medicine and race-based science that's essentially, scientific and medical racism. And they're like, no, but this is what I was taught. And it's a foundational thing. Your foundation, your very paradigms of practice and care, of your livelihood, it begins to shift when you realize that, whoa, the foundation was just sand and not concrete after all. So that's the way I can sort of relate and sort of empathize and sympathize. And it must be a grieving process. But to your point, and it is a moment for us to then recalibrate and say, yo, okay, there is a chronic, constant hypervigilance that I need to adopt and incorporate into my sort of training of others, my children, my nieces, nephews, the people in my lives, my peers, other pieces, other folks in my life, in church, in mosque, in wherever, in just in our spheres of living and influence, to ensure that it is up to us to maintain what we want. Now, I know my sister Nisi, she like, look, I'm just trying to find how to leave out of here because I think this is all
this is
like,
y'all
this
can
is
have
all
this.
cooked. It's done. I'm done. Like,
It's a
stick a
wrap.
fork in it.
Yeah.
It's done. I'm trying to go. And I
But
hear
the thing
you.
is that that's because I've been woke, so to speak. I know a lot of people don't understand what woke really means. It
Yes.
doesn't mean that you're a social justice warrior, a snowflake, whatever. It means you
Yeah.
don't sleep on evil because you
Mhm.
know it's still out there, it's still coming. Like 9, 10, never sleep again. That's what being woke means. And so it's like we've become so complacent. I'm complacent. I swear, because like even with Trump, I was just like, I'm never voting again. Like this is a joke. This is a farce. Why would I even participate in this? And it's just like I can't imagine how many people are like me who don't even remember Schoolhouse Rock, don't know how a bill comes into, and it's just like how many of us have given up, and while we gave up, they snuck right in and took everything away, all these freedoms.
Took everything away. It's a
Yeah.
hypervigilance. We have to like be on it like brown on beans. It's like all the time. To
Yeah.
your point, you never sleep. That you stay awake. You stay super awake. You are not just vigilant. You're hyper vigilant. We can't take any of this for granted because that is just the nature of democracy. If you the democracy we envision, not the democracy we have now, which I don't call democracy.
It's
And Nisi, I wanted to quote the quote I was looking for when you were talking about white folks voting against their interests. And there's a book that's written by Dr. Jonathan Metzl called Dying of Whiteness that I usually recommend to folks who are like just befuddled by how white folk vote against their own issue. Why they like suicidal like that? And President Lyndon B. Johnson said, "This is the president of the
I know
country.
what you're talking
That
about.
you
Yeah.
remember that one? If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he will notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, he'll
Period.
give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. The very grift of the identity of whiteness is to convince you that you're intrinsically, your inherent quality is that you're better than somebody else. Like that is the intrinsic inherent quality of whiteness. If you are not better than somebody else, then what are you? You cease to exist. So they have to, and everything has to be framed around that. You may have no teeth, no insurance, your blood pressure is sky high, it's 400 over 1 million, you have no house, no food, nothing. But if we can tell you that those rapists coming from Mexico or those welfare people that want to steal your tax dollar, you're not paying taxes either because you have no money, but somehow the potential of you earning money and one
Exactly.
day being a millionaire, a billionaire, a fake billionaire like your God, Trump, and all those things. So that's the possibility
You
at
got
that.
gold toilets now. I'm not gonna let you talk about him like that.
The Donald got toilets. The Donald got toilets.
But no, you're right.
My
Because
bad.
just
Forgive
in
me.
Texas,
I
like
was
like
incorrect in my
literally,
speech.
this is a place where they freeze to death every winter. Okay.
Mhm.
They have a free market, a free energy market. So you could end up with a $20,000 gas bill while
Mhm.
like everyone's laughing to the bank while you freeze to death.
Mhm.
And 50% of their state's voters support the 6-week ban on abortions.
Mhm.
And it's like some of those laws are so extreme. Like with the Texas one, has that sort of bounty hunting vigilante lawsuit scheme in it
Mhm.
where you can,
Mhm.
like any citizen can sue somebody else for $10,000 in damages
ten
in a civil
thousand
court
dollars. Yeah.
against abortion providers or anyone who aids and abets illegal abortion.
Yeah.
Like just from what?
Just you giving someone a ride. But you give someone a ride to Chantel house.
Mhm.
You don't know what's going on.
Right.
Right. But now you're liable to you could
Right.
be part of that lawsuit.
Mhm.
Them deputizing citizens is a slippery slope um, to some very bad things that have happened in the past,
Just
i.e.,
dark.
lynch mobs.
I.e. lynch mobs.
I mean,
Yes.
it is very
It
analogous,
sounds
and
very slave catching to me.
you see cycles
It's giving
happening.
slave catching. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because look at the society we live in. It's like hyper polarized,
Mhm.
super violent. I mean,
Mhm.
that's just not it's a recipe for disaster to me.
Yeah, and unfortunately, from a legal standpoint, because of the divisiveness, because of the two system way of doing things now, the one thing you can count on is that nothing is going to get done. That's the one constant where you have these two sides who are really two sides. They're not really looking out for the common person and what their best interests are or how to make Americans' lives better. That's the goal. But the inside joke is that they're not given any inch on either side, and we're left to be in the middle.
Right.
But Dr. Opara, what is that? I mean, what's that like from the perspective of a medical provider, where we're basically criminalizing healthcare professionals in this way if they help people get the medical care that they need?
Well, it's scary. It's scary. So my field, I'm an internal medicine and pediatric doctor. I don't provide abortion care, but I sure do provide contraception care and reproductive health care and women's health, care, and provide pre and post care for those who do receive the procedure of an abortion. And right now in Michigan, we have the 1931 law. I think it started off much earlier than that. Then it was updated in 1931, so we call it 1931 law that essentially renders the performance or the participation in abortion a felony punishable for up to 4 years. We have Republican state reps right now who are pushing for an expansion of or extension of the 4-year punishment to 10-year punishment, so trying to make it even more punitive. Right now, the promise that we have, again, is just by mouth, is that nobody's gonna implement that, but there's no guarantee. Just the way this happened, we can hear tomorrow, well, uh, it's now in effect, but essentially it is in effect because it's in all state laws are immediately, if they're already on the books, are immediately in effect. So right now we don't know. My sister colleague, another black woman doctor, and she's a director. Actually, she's the CEO of a FQHC, Federally Qualified Health Center, and they provide birth control and other reproductive health services. And she immediately called me like, EJ, shit has hit the fan. What are we gonna do? And I said, girl, like, look, gird up, and let's start calling everybody, our representatives, our organizations, reproductive justice organizations, and figure out how we move in this moment. So I think there's supposed to be a town hall going on locally that one of my reps will be updating me on, and she wants me to participate in. There was a march in downtown Detroit earlier. I couldn't participate in because I had to do some family obligations, but this is going to be an ongoing, thing. But for the doctors, we don't know. And on my way coming to my parents' house right now, which is where I am, I was listening on the radio, and they were interviewing a few other docs, and and same feeling, which is, we don't know. And doctors by and large are risk averse. In general, we tend to be a risk averse group. I'm sure Jamel knows very much about that. And so
Well,
look, I don't, we, a lot of us, we're not the best in terms of being up and up with what's going on politically. Unfortunately, that's part of why we get into trouble, and like, and we have to
Yeah.
do better about that. And so they, all they'll hear is abortion, reproductive health, legal, prison, and it's like, I don't know if I can even write this birth control for you. So we're going to have a mixed bag. There's going to be a lot of work for our medical societies and organizations to get us all together. I believe a few groups, ACOG, American College of OBGYN, and a few others have released their statements. So we're going to need to get together and organize around what we do. Now, keep in mind, the same physicians, we do have groups, because again, we know the history of American medicine and how sort of integrated it was with, or it is, was and is, with white supremacy and
Period.
and and other systems of violence and oppression in this country. So we do have a group of doctors that are also part of supporting this, right? And there is a group of doctors, OBGYNs, ironically, who are pro-life, like American pro-life OBGYN, I don't know what they're called, but who are celebrating at the same time. And we have, I think, all the docs that are in the Congress are all Republican and conservative. So it's
And
it's
those are
it's
the
also
same
that.
doctors, like the Louisiana dude who doesn't know why the
Exactly.
black
Yes. A
maternity fatality
bill
rate
is
is so
being
high. They
exactly.
are
So
not pro-life.
we still have that
Period.
right. It's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. But by and large, for those of us with some sense in our heads, and who are still about the life of doing good and not doing harm, and standing up for people, and who are truly about justice and equity and anti-oppression and building a better world, um, the answer is that it is scary, because you don't know where the line is, and it depends on your state. So if anyone is listening in medicine, healthcare, the thing is to look, you got to get up and up. What's going on in your state, and what are the rules there, and what is the guidance there? And we're going to be looking at our health departments and other people to figure out also what is being done. But it's a shaky time. There's a lot going on, and from our medical societies, the health department, the states, capitals, all these pieces are going to need to come together. But it's going to take a hot minute. So it's going to be a confusing time, and it's going to vary from state to state. It's going to vary. So we
The
so
thing
so
is
the
like,
long and short is it's a hot mess. And who suffers is our patients. Our patients are
exactly.
communities. There is a woman or a birthing person this moment while we're talking, who's gonna need, or who is needing, or in need of abortion or some form of reproductive health right this second, in this moment. And I can only be a butterfly on the wall to see how the conversation is going in her home, and then also with her care provider. Like, what is that, like,
Yeah.
what is the content of that conversation in this very moment? Women and birthing people are scared and are just confused, on top of the already challenging position they are in right now, just from their health standpoint and their body standpoint. Now, superimpose upon that this whole situation, and not knowing what to do, what's going to land her in jail, what's not going to land her in jail, and what does it mean? This is just the average birthing person right now that needs to, is trying to make a decision about her life in this very moment. It is really scary. It's really scary.
And I think that, there's already a disproportionate impact to Black and Latinx and Indigenous women, minorities, marginalized communities, even white communities that are, impoverished and disadvantaged. This is going to impact them too. But, if you're Black and Hispanic in a state that already limits access to abortions, you're far more likely to need one than a white woman. A lot of people are going to have to return to having unsafe abortions and seeking practices that might be harmful to them. And I think part of that, women of color in states with like restrictive abortion laws often have limited access to healthcare in general.
In general.
And they have a lack of choices for effective birth control. And obviously in a lot of these red states, like they don't believe in critical race theory or science or the roundness of the planet. And so they often have ineffective or inadequate sex education as well. I mean, it is round. I don't know. Like we fly planes. You can it's fine. It's fine. It's cool. So it's like there's this lack of sex education, and then we're still having a hard time talking about it anyway. And so it's like those like women and like you said, birthing persons in those states, they have limited choices as it is. And then with these restrictions, we're going to see people return to risky practices that are going to be harmful to patients.
And you see, if I may build on that a little bit, not only the risky practices, and again, it's important to note that the only thing that would change vis-a-vis abortion by outlawing, abortion, restricting access to it, etc., is not abortions. The number of abortions. That's not, people are still going to go ahead and get their abortions. All that would change is the deaths and the suffering, right, and the morbidities and the mortalities from unsafe abortion practices and procedures. And not only that piece, I think that there's also, and there was a wonderful article written, I believe is New York Times, today or recently, that's talked about that it's not only the unsafe abortion practices themselves that women will and birthing people will suffer from, but it will also be just like from delayed care. Right? So it's not, from delayed care, from ignoring of their interests and their needs and requests and frankly I'll call it mispractice, so to speak, of care. It's gonna be more than just go back alley necessarily experiences or procedures, but really just the delay or the misappropriation of resources, as in regards to them, or the ignoring and the sort of overlooking of their needs. And this is going to create quite a lot of suffering, and I just don't understand how these justices could sit there and know that, because they know it's not that they don't know. People have been saying this for years, so they know, and just not care.
Death eaters do not care about life. We've established that.
Unfortunately, it's called an agenda.
Yeah.
This was put in motion. You can look back at past events that have happened, how one president was denied a Supreme Court justice.
One got three.
Right, and how one stacked the court. and how this was the exact shoe that dropped next. So do not, unfortunately, do not make yourself believe that this just happened by some happenstance.
Walk us through their confirmation hearings, though, because do you remember when they were asking the questions about Roe v. Wade?
Yeah.
And each one of them were they said something like, we don't believe this is a super, what do they call it? Where it's this is an immutable right. Yeah. What does that mean? A lot of them were yes, we understand this is the law, but we don't believe this is something that couldn't be changed.
Because it was derived of the 14th Amendment, which is a constitutional amendment. I mean, it's not explicitly stated in the Constitution that you have the right to an abortion.
So it's not fixed.
Right. But I don't know of any explicit right. There's no explicit right to have a gun. I mean, or an AR-15, but it just depends on how they interpret the Constitution. So unfortunately, these decisions that they make have real life impacts.
Let's talk about how they stack the deck, though, because Trump came in, had the fortune of getting 3 picks for the bench. But Trump wouldn't have came in without the 55% of white women who voted for him. And I'm just saying, if you want to get into the failures of feminism,
be specific about what type of feminism, though, because it wasn't Black feminism.
How many types are there? Lady, how many types are there?
There is white feminism and there's Black feminism, honey.
We're fighting for different things. The tactics have never been the same. Racism always trumps feminism, no pun intended. And I think that's a huge issue that, hasn't really gotten enough play, because anytime we try to raise the issue, we're stamped back out stop trying to make it a race thing. But the thing is the truly feminist issues, somebody's not listening, I'm gonna start over again. The truly feminist issues are often the ones that are faced by minority, disadvantaged women. It's not the ones about whether or not you can let yourself down off your perennial pedestal and go work for a living, which we've all been doing for a very long time. We all have been working for centuries, decades. The real feminist issues about body autonomy, about rights, all of those things have been the issues that have been faced by minority women who ostensibly never have had a real voice in the so-called feminist movement. I'm gonna just throw that grenade out there and I'm gonna let you catch it, Dr.
No, there it is. I caught it. Okay. And I think that has been the point that Black women have made since forever. We talk about intersectionality and the fact that, as Black women, we experience sexism and racism. And if you are a queer Black woman, and also sexism, and homophobia and racism, if you're a queer Black disabled woman and ableism, queer Black disabled woman who is an immigrant, and xenophobia, and the list goes on, but that we experience these sort of multiple experiences of oppression, but they're all rooted in anti-Blackness and white supremacy. And so, and we understand that. And we talk about reproductive justice, a name and a movement that came out in, was created by 12 Black women in 1994 out of Chicago. And, and they understood that, this fight for reproductive health and reproductive rights also lies within a fight for Black liberation. And that we have a right to have children if we choose to. We have a right to not have children if we choose to. We have a right to parent the children that we have in safe and sustainable communities free from violence and oppression, including that from police, from the state, state-sanctioned violence and other forms of violence in terms of community disinvestment and, legacies of redlining, and the list goes on. And we have a right to have sex and have sex for pleasure and as well. And so Black women have always understood that, and that movement had to derive from, or rather grow out and separate from the main reproductive rights. Um, a movement, because that was always ignored. To your point, exactly what you said was ignored when we brought up race. It happened today, even on Twitter Space discussion, that one of our brothers was hosting, and doing a great job, I would say, of hosting. Chris Evans, not Captain America is his name, but he did a great job of really facilitating and moderating a beautiful space. And of course, white women came up and said their piece and made some good points. But there was a sister that came up, because she had a very good point. Because white women will talk about, like, we're getting back to the Handmaid's Tales. And the sisters had to say, I need you to stop with the, like, fictionalizing and fantasy sort of comparison of the Handmaid's Tale. There was a real life Handmaid's Tales that we've lived through, that was Black women, indigenous women, Black and brown women, where our lives, our bodies, right, where we're owned as property for the production and reproduction of labor to build wealth for white men and families, and white women by proxy, and that was upheld by white women. So
They love to fantasize a dystopian future, as if
this
we didn't have a
dystopian
dystopian
future that
past.
hasn't.
We can't talk about the dystopian past.
Is here now.
Yeah.
We've lived, and many of us continue to live through it now, today. And this erasure and ignorance and overlooking of that reality is frankly disrespectful and insulting. And this is why, we have womanism, and Black feminism that had to be created to name the ways in which we have to contend with white supremacy that was also inherent and upheld and maintained in these so-called white feminist movements and other white sort of women type movements. So I agree.
It was precisely the Handmaid's Tale. We were breeders. Like, it was literally precisely the Handmaid's Tale. Like, everyone thinks it's so profound that this white woman wrote this, like, dystopian fantasy that's just such great television. That was real life. We were breeders, milkmaids, sex toys, everything else, torture dolls, everything. Like, that's not a fantasy. That's what really happened.
It's not a fantasy. It really happened. And your inability to contend with your whiteness and confront your whiteness and the ways that you uphold that system and benefit from that system by proxy and by ownership, direct ownership, is, part of the problem. It is 100% part of the problem. You don't want to see yourself as an oppressor, but you are. And
what they don't want to see themselves as is the oppressed. But just like I said about how evil is indiscriminate, fascism is uncontainable. Once you have authoritarian government policies, you let those tentacles reach into your lives. They reach into everyone's homes and lives and households and dictate how everyone lives. So it will touch you. It might harm us the most, but it's still going to restrict everyone's freedoms. It's not something you can control. You can't let it.
It's not. And now it restricts ours disproportionately worse, but it's gonna affect your ass. But ours are more so on the chopping block, and the stakes are higher for us in very meaningful ways. But you're 1,000,000% correct. It's everybody's ass is affected. All your civil rights are on the chopping block now. All your rights to privacy and the sort of the repercussions. And I really also would love to hear from Jamel also, like, in terms of the implications, because we know that this was a privacy issue. Okay, now and now what all else? Because folks need to understand this is not a quote women's issue, and people still come into space talk about my heart really goes out to these women, and I'm looking at them like, Negro, you have no idea, and I think it needs to be spelled out for people what's on the chopping block and at risk from the loss of this. That they think that they're safe. You're not.
No. You can extrapolate as far as your mind will allow you to. There are very, very few personal liberties that are codified within the 14th Amendment. So if you come up with any off the wall argument that the majority of those people say, that sounds good, it's liable to fly. And you're, I think what you said was 100% right earlier. Some of us are still in shock. We're still in mourning. I mean, I'm sitting here. I mean, and I'm literally trying to think. Well, gee, how far can it go?
Well, if you look at like the state laws, if we put the power into the states, like this Texas one was like the only example that we have to point towards. But they, in order to turn neighbor against neighbor and have people go against people's business to figure out where they go and who they going to see, turn them in, sue them. I mean, you have to at some point invade their privacy, spy on them, right? Essentially.
Sounds like some old George Orwell, Big Brother
I'm
stuff.
just saying.
And I mean, I say that flippantly, but in the reality, the state of Texas just basically codified spying and
snitching.
And getting a reward for that.
Right. They basically said, get your money.
Yeah.
And boy, that has some really big ripples.
Snitching.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Like really neighbor against neighbor. You're right. Like that's crazy. Well, more than 40 states have turned in more than 365 bills restricting access to abortion already. I can hear states' rights without hearing slavery. Like, like when has state rights been used to protect and preserve and do good for folks? Like when you look at, through the arc of history, it's always to do some crazy shit. It's always to be like, no, we need the right to do some crazy shit. In in our state,
they can write it however they want.
Usually in the South,
places. But literally, the next steps that will be coming will be you'll need a prescription or you'll need some kind of authority to get a abortion pill, something that is on the market, something that is sold over the counter.
Over the counter.
They're going to start implementing state laws that will restrict or say who can have and who cannot have those types of drugs.
So now are we taking away the power of the FDA? Like, what does that mean? What's that implication?
Well, they've just said that it's a product. It's safe or it does whatever it's intended. It's up to the states to determine the products right that come through their state borders. So unfortunately, it's not really up to at the individual level.
You thought you had a drug trade before.
Well, I'll tell you that's a great point that you said, Dr. Nisi, around FDA. My understanding is that one of the White House's announcements is that for any product that is FDA approved, that I don't know how they're going to do it and what mechanism or vehicle they're going to use to protect it from being at risk of being subject to to these laws at this point. As long as it's FDA approved, that it will not be subject. And I have to read the fine lines or the fine details around what they mean. But there's something about a product that's FDA approved that will somehow render it exempt from being targeted. And we will see. We're staying tuned for more.
Well, stay tuned.
My paranoid mind immediately starts worrying about for the pharmacists. I'm just like, they're gonna have straight lynch mobs. I mean, people are just. Times is already crazy. You know what I mean?
Well, there was a lady on Twitter that talking about take your kids to the doctor now and get them on birth control. Like, right. I was laughing. I was like, girl, but I wasn't mad at her because that is how crazy, this is crazy times. Very. You play crazy games, you get crazy prizes.
Period.
This is where people are going. You don't expect people, not these people, to act rationally. So when you talk about people are going to be rushing all kinds of, I know right now people are out here ordering Spring Tech, and all the OCPs, all the birth control pills and everything that they can right now. I'm just I mm, I
It
think as
creates
people
a
get
black
up from the
market.
shock.
It does create a black market.
Yeah,
There's never been a black market for abortion pills. There is tonight.
There is tonight. That's crazy. I
that's
don't
what they
even know where.
created.
What is life, honestly? So I thought maybe we could just wrap up by everybody just kind of zooming out and looking at the bigger picture. I'm just gonna point up at the sky like Chicken Little, but I'll give you guys the last word. I don't know.
Jamel, please, why don't you go
Yeah.
ahead?
Well, I don't have the words to really express um, my displeasure. Um, it hurts to say that, things that, or the view that you had your entire life is now incorrect. So uh, I'm still really coming to grips with what
Yeah.
this really
Hmm.
means. Um, it's there's just no upside, unfortunately. There's going to be, as we've stated, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering that is going to come out of this, a lot of diminished ability. But um, we have to do our best to try to figure out ways to overcome these obstacles, and we look to our leaders, the doctors, people who can advise us. So um, that's where you guys are doing really really good things to get the word out to help people. So continue to fight, and thank you just for the opportunity.
Dr. Parr.
Man, I don't know where to start, honestly. But just a few things. Number one is take heart. It's okay to grieve and um, feel your feelings. Just feel your feelings. It is what, just feel your feelings. Take care of yourself. There is an auntie in the reproductive justice movement who I try to pull into some conversations today. She was like, I'm going to go take care of myself. I'm going to go, take a bath, or I'm just going to go take it easy. I've been doing this work forever. I'm not going to be out here, reacting and being reactionary. We knew this was coming. It's time to rest and recruit and rejuvenate. And so my encouragement to folks is take care of yourself, grieve, and mourn, and do what you need to do. And then when you can dry your tears, and sometimes even while you're still in the middle of drying your tears, but when you feel ready, then you stand up and let's do this work. Democracy is not something that you lay down with. At least now, you if you were asleep, you're awake. And now the goal is to stay awake, and not just awake but hyper awake and on it. Learn everything you can about what this means for you in your state, as well as federally, nationally. Look and see who are the local reproductive justice organizations. If you go to my Twitter page, at INNODIM, and you go to, I already listed a few examples of people you can follow, but you can go to Sister Song, as in my sister, and I sing a song, and that Sister Song, that at their website, you can go to Black Mamas Matter Alliance, BMMA, Black Matter Mama. Why do I trip on that? Black Mamas Matter Alliance. They have a whole list of partners, Black led organizations that do reproductive work. You can also go to in our own voice, or in our voice. And this is a group of Black women led reproductive justice groups as well. The AFIA Center, AFIYA Center, or AFIYA, I think. And also Ubuntu, the Ubuntu Black Family Wellness. There's so many examples to go, but you can just go on my timeline and you can find these links and support them. You can also go to abortionfunds.org, abortionfunds.org, I believe, abortionfunds.org. Let me actually make sure I'm giving you that correct information.
We can drop it
Funds.org.
in the chat too if
Is it
you.
correct? Yes, .org, National Network of Abortion Funds, to donate as well to abortion funds. So know what the people on the ground are doing, support them, amplify their work, donate to them, lift their work up, and pepper, pepper your local representatives, pepper them. I immediately texted mine, and luckily, and the other one already again knows me. I always tell people it's not that I want you to certainly know your representatives, but I'm more interested in them knowing you. And so, for this lady to call, reach out to me, Dr. Parr, you available? We're gonna do a town hall. We'll need you there. I'm like, yes, absolutely. So pepper your reps, know them and let them know you, okay? And get engaged. I know we have all kinds of feelings about voting, but for me, voting for me is also just my respect to the ancestors that died for that right.
That
And
were
it's not the
murdered for that
only,
right. They were
yes,
murdered for that right.
that's right. That's right. Absolutely. And it's not the only way. You don't just vote and walk off. No, you vote and you're like, you will know my name. You hold them accountable. You pepper them. You bother them. You are all up in their DMs. You are all up in their inboxes. You're in their phone. Listen, they know, they see you coming and they rush to, what is that thing they wanted? Know what ballots are on in Michigan. We have a ballot initiative protecting reproductive freedom, ballot initiative on the book. So that's what we're going to be pushing from a legal standpoint. But there is something every single one of us can do. And while you're doing that, just take care of yourself, because this is a long haul marathon. Okay, I don't want to hear about nobody burning out, nobody breaking down, nobody having, like, a mental health challenges on according because of on the backs of this. People, like we have said, everyone here has said it. Brother Jamel said it. This is a five-decade effort. This has been going on for decades, to realize it. We have to play the short, mid, and long-term game. That's one thing these Republicans and right-wing people are good at. They can sit here and they will plan for the year 3000. So
Yeah.
we have to get smart about our strategy and collective action to move the needle to where we want. And don't worry about perfectionism. Don't worry about getting 100% people together. Just get your small group of people and work with the people that have been doing this work forever and push it along. So that's what I would encourage us to do. This happens, but we'll get on it. And from a physician standpoint, we will continue to talk amongst ourselves and help each other and get, our best practices together. But we need to do this not in isolation, but along with our grassroots people. We have to do it to respond to other people we're taking care of, to inform us of what it is that is important to them, to ensure that our policies, our practices, our protocols are aligned with the priorities of our community, and that we are working as advocates to represent the voices of our communities and the best interests of our communities boldly. So this is where I will leave us. But the work, my father was just saying earlier, because we've been talking about this. I told you I was in my parents' home about this here. And he reminded me, a luta continua. The struggle continues. But Amandla, we will overcome.
I love it. I'm really happy that you guys had a quick moment to jump on with us this evening. And thank you to everyone for joining us today for this episode of Let's Get Vaccinated on HeadMed Chats. At Head Medicine, we try to bring you real talk and mad science so you can make the decisions, to keep your loved ones safe. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter to support our effort and donate to our cause to find out about our next events. You can visit our website at hoodmedicine.org or find us on social media at hood_medicine. You can also support us by making us your Amazon Smile charity or you can shop through our Bonfire merch store at Guerrilla Gear, the Guerrilla Gear shop at Bonfire. And also be sure to come through and listen to our expert scientists, physicians, hackers, and assorted geeks on Routine Checkup with Hood Medicine every Monday morning at 11:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Lurie Daniel Favor Show, broadcasting live on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. Or this just in, you can now also join us every third Monday of the month for the Fit, Live, Win health segment on Roland Martin Unfiltered, live streaming at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube, or you can listen in on your favorite audio podcast. Thank you again, everyone. Stay safe out there. Keep up the fight. Get vaccinated. Get boosted. Save the hood.